David, my friends know that throughout my life I've been obsessed by the question of why something rather than nothing, and many people are as well. Your answer to that, I think I know, that there is an absolute being that some people you call God, and that God is a necessity. To me, that would be a great answer, but I don't see why that's the case.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say an absolute being to begin with. There would be no article in my way of phrasing it, because
absolute being, yeah. No and or no the.
You see, it's such a small question, really, so trivial. How to deal with it? It's the classic question of ontology. Many different strategies down the centuries have been employed either to answer it or to evade it. Mm-hmm. Very popular strategies right now in analytic philosophy are to say that it's a mistaken question, because absolute nothingness is just one possible state among an infinite set of possibilities, all equipossible.
And therefore, it's zero probability. Right, I reject that, because it assumes that there's equal weighting to a state of nothing and every one of those infinite possibilities.
Right. Yeah. Well, see, then I don't have to correct you, which is good. It also mistakes nothing as a modal qualifier as being a physical state simply devoid of constituents.
So get that off the table. I'm with you on that.
Well, in a sense, then, you already accept the principle even if you reject it. Because if you're willing to accept the existence of the universe as an ensemble of contingents,
yes,
the event itself of the existence of such a universe is something that in a sense you have to leave unquestioned. You've just said it can't be simply one possible state over against another possible state that is nothingness. Therefore, that the universe exists at all carries with it, it would seem, a certain logical necessity. It's not nothing.
It's not nothing, but I don't then make the step to where it becomes that there has to be some necessity. This could have just be the way things are, the brute fact, as they say.
But you're using necessity in.
It could not be that it'll be a contradiction of logic for it not to be the case.
You're using the word necessity equivocally there. The claim of necessity is not that it needs to have been the case. I mean, this is the universe. The necessity here is purely ontological. If all that exists is a state of finite contingency and causal sequacity, sequence, if you try to explain how that can come to be, if we're asking a question of possibility, why is there something rather than nothing? Sooner or later, in the deductive peregrinations that take you towards an answer, you're going to find that you have to make a choice. Are these contingent facts grounded simply in more contingency along an infinite regress? Or does there have to be that which is not contingent to allow for even the possibility of the contingent?
Right, I think that's a good question.
And the second, I think, is the logically inevitable correct answer, for the simple reason that an entire system of contingencies is itself a contingent phenomenon. There are very famous arguments about this made by, say, Ibn Sina or by Aquinas, but in a sense, it's intuitively and then logically rather obvious. An order that's entirely contingent in its constitution down to its uttermost first causes require a first cause, not just, I don't mean temporally first, I don't mean prior, but the most fundamental cause itself would have to be contingent on what? It would simply be there. Well, then it wouldn't be contingent, would it? It would again, in some sense, be a factual necessity. But does that factual necessity explain itself any better than all the other contingencies of experience which require dependency? No.
Is factual necessity the same thing as brute fact? Is that another way to say the same thing?
It would be in this case, yeah. But it would be a brute fact that would be totally, you would think, modally impossible.
So I might agree with you that to have that first cause in a logical sense, not necessarily a temporal sense, I would agree that being some kind of necessity has a better feeling to it, but I can't say that necessarily. I can't make that step, that first.
What's the alternative?
What you said, that the first cause was a brute fact or a factual necessity. That's the way things were.
But yeah, no. I'm sorry. I was invoking that as a nonsensical answer. I'm sorry. A brute fact then that is a brute contingent fact that's contingent on nothing. You're talking then about an absolute contingency. It may be an attractive premise if one wants to avoid the other possible conclusion,
right.
but I don't see it as being able to survive much logical scrutiny. The question is not, I mean, that first brute fact, if it's just a brute fact, like what? What sort of fact then would we be talking about?
Whatever it was, doesn't matter. The question is, how do you characterize that? Must you characterize that as a necessity? If it's the first brute fact, then I don't.
Not if it's a contingent first fact. Then it's contingent on something necessary. So there is still a necessity you haven't reached yet.
Well, you've added that point that you need to.
Well, that's because everything that's contingent is contingent on something. Otherwise, it's not contingent. If it's not contingent, then it's self-existent, in which case it's logically necessary.
If it's self-existent, I'm not sure it's It's a necessity that it be self-existent. That could have been just the way it is.
Again, that doesn't make any sense because in that case, self-existence, if it were simply happenstantial, if it were simply the fact that this would be the sort of finite existence that an object possesses. It would be an existence that nonetheless is, in a sense, contingent on being.
Okay, I accept that. So I want to go now to the second big problem here, and that is if you accept. If now you got me, I'm going with you to the second point. Okay. I'm saying there has to be something that is necessity in order to answer the question, why is there something rather than nothing, why is there anything at all? There has to be something of necessity. Why then must that necessity be what you and the classical traditions have called absolute being, which is your definition of God? Why does it have to be that? Why would reality, the necessity of reality, have to be that way rather than some other way?
Because the very definition of absolute being is absolute. That is, it's what's absolved of all the qualities of contingency. It's simply, in that case, it's a deduction by negation. What is it that makes something contingent? That is precisely what would be absent from the necessary.
Okay, it's almost a tautology.
Yeah, sure. At the level of ontology, it is almost tautological, and there's no reason it shouldn't be.
Okay.
Because it's precisely that tautology which should you might think be a simple deduction of reason that's absent from a lot of the argument
so
today.
I could go there, but then how do you put other characteristics on that begin to look like your kind of God? Because I don't think how you can layer onto that tautology qualities that you would call God.
No, because you ask the question of the absolute not only in terms of its ontological nature, but the way it underlies the full range of human experience and of experience of the existence of the world, and that would include the structure of consciousness, the way in which it seems to elude physical reduction, the way in which it seems to be preoccupied with transcendental ends. As I said, as long as you're asking the question only in terms of ontology, all you arrive at is the absolute, in a rather vacuous sense, perhaps, although that definition of absolute also has to contain, an infinite capacity of being. So it's not entirely vacuous, but it's devoid of all the warm and inviting features of devotional theism. But no no picture of God is simply the product of ontological deduction. That's simply one of the aspects under which one asks the question of the relation of the finite experience to its ultimate ends or its ultimate source.